Alright guys, Clock here back with another DoW2 modding tutorial. In this tutorial we'll be looking at basic model editing, including editing geometry, rigs, so like skeletons, as well as applying materials to our models. We'll need 3ds Max for this tutorial, as well as Santos Tools model editor. You should have gone through if you've gone through my tutorial in my previous video on setting up your DoW2 modding environment, you should have it demonstrates how to set this stuff up. So let me just open the little guide I have for myself here. So I'll be going over quickly over what a model is in DoW2, as well as how to display it in Santos Tools, the model editor, as well as the Santos Tools utility in 3ds Max. This one here. Okay, so without further ado, what's a model in DoW2? So, by the way, I did want to correct one thing which I brought up in which I mentioned in my previous video, which was on where to locate your model editor, because it's essentially you have this tool. So if you'll recall, under my DoW2 installation path, under Tools, under Santos Tools, I mentioned that you would have to have a model editor and then another model editor folder here. Well, that's not the case, so apparently I was mistaken. This setup that you see here, so this is my DoW2 under Tools, under Santos Tools, under model editor. This is where I have my model editor, and it's able to read all my mods. Okay, so if you're still confused, you can go back to the video. Just when you get to that part about setting up your path here, where to put all these files, just follow this, this structure here. Let me just go through it once more. So under your DoW2 installation directory, you want to go to Tools, Santos Tools, Model Editor, and there are your files. So that's that. So what is a model in DoW2? Well, the best way to explain it is it's probably through a demo. So I'm gonna go ahead and open a model. I got lots to choose from. That's a beautiful thing about DoW2. We have tons and tons of models, unlike other RTSs. So, I'll just go ahead with the Apothecary, just because it's first. Alright, so as you can see, this is the Apothecary model that we're all too familiar with. And it's comprised of three things, or I would say three important things. One is the 3D mesh, so that would be the geometry. So everything that's like 3D here that you see, it's just a mapping of coordinates on the X, Y, and Z system. And those coordinates map to each other, and they create these things called polygons, and then on those polygons you apply textures. Okay, so that's basically what a model is in its simplest form. So a model in DoW2, as you may have seen when I was opening the file, is sort of identified by the .model extension. So with the .model extension, the .model extension contains information about three important things. One, the meshes that we see here, which is the 3D geometry, as I said. Two is the materials, so which materials are applied to this model. And we can look at the variety of materials here, and for each material name, because this is one huge mesh, but there are actually different materials applied to it, to sort of show you that. Let me try deleting one of the textures so you can see for yourself. There it is. So this is a diffusion texture that applies to the chest piece, the pauldrons, the legs, and so forth. So there are different materials mapped to different parts of this mesh. That's one thing. The other thing is, for each of the mesh objects, there are a variety of texture layers. Texture layers. So these texture layers are rendered by a shader. A shader basically tells the game or the engine which textures to render. So for DoW2 units, such as infantry vehicles and so forth, we use by the way, this is where we select our shader. We use the DoW2 unit shader. There are other things such as DoW2 objects or static world objects that are used to shade world objects. So I can actually click on this, and you'll see this list of textures actually change. So if I go OK, so you can see we don't have the same choice of textures. So the team textures, for example, is gone. I can show you that. So this was the previous shader, the actual shader that we should use for DoW2, and it has this, for example, this team texture that falls under the dynamic category, so it changes according to what the player chooses in the army painter. Okay. So that's the mesh. So I said the mesh is the 3D geometry. The materials are basically links to textures, and as you can see, they all start with the art folder, and then they sort of trace the appropriate, or they map to the appropriate material location, folder location. So if I click here, for example, this is telling me that it's under art, race, marines, troops, armor, blah blah blah, until we get to the Apothecary diffusion texture. So that would be here, and I can actually open that using this. Okay, so it's not opening because I don't have the appropriate tool to open DDS files, but let me just show you how that would look. Here. So if I go under my mod, so I'm currently using the test mod under art. So I know it shows the codex mod here, but I'm just demonstrating demonstrating. Actually, let me just go under codex. Doesn't hurt. Data, art, marines, troops, war gear, armor, apothecary, and then apothecary diffusion texture is. Let me just details. There it is. Oh no, that's the backpack. So it's this one here. Okay, paint. I do have it. Okay, so this is the actual diffusion texture that's mapped to the apothecary, and I can always change it to something else, like say it won't look good obviously because it's not suited for it, but let's just say I use the Black Templar diffusion texture. Okay, I have the wrong texture selected, so it's this one, and then I choose the Black Templar apothecary diffusion texture. It obviously doesn't look good, but as you can see, the diffusion texture changed. So yeah, that's basically how you let me undo that using this. So that's basically how you map textures to the actual mesh objects. So for the other mesh objects, say the pauldrons. So by the way, these are the different materials that we have, and each of them maps to a mesh object, right? But the name's not always indicative of what it maps to. So you can see there are two names for the apothecary backpack. I'm sure they don't both map to the apothecary backpack's texture. So, but yes, apothecary texture, I can sort of remove this, and as you can see, that wasn't his backpack. That was his lens, his little eye lens technology. So that's basically how you can change textures and apply them to the mesh objects using the model editor. So I just want to clarify that these actually map to files that are contained, like they're actual files, and the file type is .dds. The properties. It's actually a .dds file type. So these are just compressed images that games use. Okay, so that's that. So as I said, the model is comprised of the mesh, the materials, which I just showed how to edit, and then the bones. So the actual rig. So what I can do is I can actually hide the mesh and actually show the bones. And these are the bones that control our apothecary mesh. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of bones here, but the animations aren't in the scope of this video. But okay, I don't even have them here. If I did, I would actually animate it to show you that the bones actually move. But because I don't have them, I just want to demonstrate that these are the bones. This is how you can view the bones in the model editor. So I'll also be demonstrating this stuff in 3ds Max, which is obviously the more important place where you would edit this stuff. But within the model editor, let's show our mesh again. Let's hide our bones material. This is supposed to hide and show material, but it doesn't do anything. These are markers. I will be going over those in when we open it in 3ds Max. But essentially, markers. I'm behind the message to show you. So for now, we only have these markers here at the bottom. But essentially, markers. They sort of tell they map effects to certain parts of the model. So if I want my sword to glow, I can put markers on the sword and tell my effects to glow or to play at those marker points. So actually, let me just quickly show you this, because might as well cover it here before we do it in 3ds Max. So this is a black sword. Let's see if I have any markers. Yeah, so let me hide the mesh. We can see all these markers. We can even go to this rollout to sort of see the marker names. And essentially what these do is they tell the effects, such as the fire or lightning effects, to map to these markers. Also, when you make for melee strikes, you have this spark that goes off. Well, that's indicated by this marker melee swing, and that's, if you select it, actually highlight it here. So that's where the spark actually plays, and I can show you the sword again. And yeah, the spark sort of plays here. But yeah, that's essentially what markers do. So we can also determine which bone the markers are connected to. So essentially, we want the FX to move with the sword, and the sword itself is controlled by. Let me show you. So if we go to bones, let's hide the markers for a sec. If we go to the bones, it's showing the marine skeleton, and these are the hands of the marine skeleton. And if I select his right hand, right hand, where are you? Right hand. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's the forearm. It's sort of selected, and then the hand. Where is it? That's weird. Should be here somewhere. But the idea is that. So force, weapon. Regardless, what's important is that this sword is controlled by one of these hand bones, and if you go to the marker, we notice it's mapped to the R weapon. So it's actually this bone here, R weapon. So as this bone controls this sword, the marker that was here, this marker, is it even visible? Yeah. So this marker is actually controlled by the bone that was here. So the FX always follows the sword. So that's the important thing with markers. You can add markers and remove. You can experiment with this. It's quite intuitive. So you can choose which bone controls which marker. For each marker, there are different bones controlling it. But yeah, that's the idea behind markers here. So I can hide those. I'll be going over them in 3ds Max as well. And see where we are. 13 minutes, not bad. So hide the bones for the time being. Let's open our apothecary model again. Let's see what else. So bounding volumes. What's important is let's see, these. So these symbox. Okay, I wonder why bounding boxes symbox. Okay, so how should I explain this? Symboxes essentially help with collision. So models essentially can't approach the unit within this radius. So we can always edit this in 3ds Max, or we can edit it here, like by increasing this. Let's say, okay, like that. We can edit the z coordinates as well as the y coordinates. And then I think we should have chosen a different setting. I can do fit. So luckily, Model Editor has this fit thing, which actually works pretty well. Again, we can import these into 3ds Max and edit them, but units essentially collide with this unit using these boundaries, so they don't walk through it, as well as the actual the mapping of the tracers. So when this unit is shot at, the tracers sort of they fall within this within these perimeters, right? So that's essentially Symbox. A cover box, a similar idea, but the cover box is mainly for units wanting to take cover. Cover boxes are more pertinent or relevant to vehicles and buildings, not to infantry. So you can actually set the size of a cover box. Okay, so the fit here works in mysterious ways. You can see it doesn't work very well. You'll have to adjust it, but for vehicles, you can just import it into, you can edit it here, or import it into 3ds Max and edit it yourself. So these are the most important, maybe, bounding boxes you'll need to use or know how to edit for DoW2 models. I don't know much about what rigid bodies do. I mean, rendering bounding volumes. All I know is that they essentially help. Okay, let me just uncheck these so there's less clutter. So these rendering volumes, they sort of help. Sorry, there. Yeah, render bounding volumes. They sort of make the rendering of the model more efficient somehow. I haven't read too much on it, but you're welcome to read about it. I think these are handled pretty well by by Santos Tools. I don't know too much about that. Actually, I can actually check just to confirm. Let me go to export options. I'll be covering this, but for now, okay. So apparently they're not. Okay, maybe they're handled by default without giving you a choice to actually check them off or edit them. Okay, so essentially they're not something you would probably want to touch. They're efficiently created and bounded by either 3ds Max or the game engine. I honestly don't know. Alright, so these light damage. So these settings are more relevant to world objects. So when a wall is shot at, it starts to wear, and eventually collapses. So this essentially shows different states of that wall, and so these are more relevant to world objects. I don't think I'll be getting into editing world objects anytime soon. So world objects are like essentially anything like map related, not individual like player model related or building related, like player buildings. So things like anything related to a map, like the towers, the stairs, the walls, so forth. Cover. So that's that. But these are relevant. These are levels of details, LODs. So these essentially tell the engine what level of detail you want to render given the user settings, the user graphic settings. So as of now, when I select different ones, let me just hide these so they don't get in the way. So as I select different ones, they don't really interfere with they don't really change the poly count of the mesh, so the quality of the mesh essentially. They don't mess around with the geometry. That's because there's actually only one level of detail, which is this. But if I open, say, another model, say standard power armor, just a sec. Power armor. Alright, so this, if I scroll down here, it has more than one LOD. It has actually two. So one, this is the high. By the way, when you see LOD 0 and LOD 2, this is the higher level of detail. This is like it's higher quality, and this is lower quality. So the numbers are sort of opposite to what they actually show in the game. So LOD 0 may appear to render the lower model, but it's actually the higher quality model. And if I select LOD 2, actually here, if I select LOD 2, you notice that the polygons sort of don't have the trim, and the model is just overall more jagged. So let me just show you again. And there it is. So I won't be going into, unfortunately, how to edit this, how to implement different levels of detail, because I frankly don't know how to do it. I only know how to edit one model and how to save one model within a single, or one mesh, sort of one group of mesh for a model per model file. So but essentially, if you wanted to do, say, another level of detail, all you would do is sort of save a model that looks like this and a model that looks like this, and export them as a single model, as in the case here. But again, there are people who know more about this. Unfortunately, I don't. So I won't be going over it. Yeah, so that's LOD, that's level of detail. It's an important concept you should know. So we talked about sim boxes and cover boxes. Let's see, reset camera. All these are related to sort of the viewport here. So you can sort of sometimes when you render effects here in model editor, it can play some effects, and it can shake the camera. If you don't want that, you can remove it. It can also play sound. You can remove that. This is splats, so sometimes it'll also show like splats from effects and stuff. So you can remove those or leave them. Effects, yeah, effects are. I haven't actually experimented with these, to be honest, so I'm not too familiar with them. So this is the grid. You can show or remove the grid. I don't find the grid very useful in the model editor. I wish Santos had incorporated sort of like a front of a functionality where you can sort of face directly. So right where you can be facing your model perfectly, because that's what's relevant to a lot of modders. They want to see the model relative to the world. But that's alright. I mean, the model editor is a very, very versatile tool, so I can't complain. So that's the grid on and off. This is camera shake. Oh no, these are the axes. So these axes here. Honestly, the color doesn't help that much. I wish there were actually symbols to indicate the axes. Regardless, most of this is not relevant because most of the editing you'll be doing is in 3ds Max. Alright, so edit lights. I haven't worked with this too much, so I'm gonna skip right over it. These are team colors, so you can actually, one of the great things about model editor is you can actually see how the team colors come out. So I can actually choose, for example, Marauders, and that gives me the Marauders team color. Now this only works if you have a team texture mapped to this mesh. So if you'll recall, under the DoW2 unit shader, we have these textures, and we also have this team texture, and we can actually open it to see that. Okay, so in Paint.net doesn't actually show you all the layers, but there are different colors here to sort of indicate what should be colored what. So for example, if I choose, say, the Dark Angels, most of it is green here, but as you can see, this part and the tubes here are colored. Well, that is actually indicated by the team texture, but you can't see it here because Paint.net doesn't have that functionality where it's able to show you different channels. I won't be going over into texture editing. I'll simply be showing how to apply textures, and I've already shown you on the model editor how to change textures, how to change which texture maps to which piece of armor or which mesh object. Anything else? Edit settings, so you can edit. Okay, so I won't be going over this now. There's this where if you edit the texture here, you want to see it update right away without having to save and open the model again. I leave this checked off. It's very beneficial. So let's just say I edit this diffusion texture. I can actually open it. I can just darken it a lot. Levels. Darken it a lot and you'll see a change. So when I save it, Control S, it should darken. There it is. That's because I had the auto reload modify checked off. So let me undo that. And Control S. I did Control Z to undo it, and Control S to save. And it's already back to its original color. So logs. I haven't found much use for logs for the model editor, but you may find it useful. The model editor is a very versatile tool, actually. So it's actually the only tool where you can actually incorporate the animations and the map the animations to the motion trees. So while you can actually get animations to work or to export from 3ds Max to be used in DoW2, there's no way to actually tell the engine how to render the animations except through motion trees. But I won't be going over motion trees and animations here because that's I want to keep that for another video, an animation video. So that's pretty much what there is as regards model editing, at least in the model editor. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going into 3ds Max to actually import a model, edit its rig, so its skeleton, and also show you how to apply textures within 3ds Max and how to export it back out. So I'll minimize this. Let me go back to the home directory here. So when I open 3ds Max, let's see, yeah. So when I open 3ds Max, I have this viewport here, which is where I will view my geometry as well as the textures that are mapped to that geometry. I can create an object to show you. So here's a box. This is a box, and yeah, this is a box. This is where I view my anything related to my current scene. So a scene is basically all the objects, and yeah, all the objects that are currently present. I guess I'm not sure how to define it. It's just where all your objects are. Let me delete that. So let's jump into Santos Tools, and then I'll probably be discussing some of the other functionality of 3ds Max, some of the important things you'll need for editing models. So let me just okay. So when you start off 3ds Max, you're greeted with this screen, and under utilities here, you can you have a variety of different utilities. One of them is Max Script. So Max Script is basically you can use code to sort of do graphic editing. So you can edit your 3D models and textures using code, surprisingly, even animations. But that's what Santos Tools 2 was actually made with. It was made using code, and you can essentially access it through Max Script, the Max Script utility. So under Max Script, you have this rollout, and under this rollout you can select Santos Tools. So I already have it open here. Okay. Wow, this is weird. Okay, so under Max Script, under Santos Tools 2, and if you don't see this, it's because you didn't set up your Santos Tools 2 properly, your scripts. You didn't set them up properly here. You want to go back to my video on setting up your DoW2 modding environment to do that properly. But you should get these rollouts. So a rollout where you can actually select your mod, import models, export models, and manage animations. So I can select my mod. The one I was working on just now was Codex, but I think I'll just be working on the Tessa mod for the time being, for the purposes of this tutorial. In fact, let me just open it here. Is there a way to just reset this new? Okay, so I'm not sure how to reset this. I guess I just gotta close it and open it again. I can select my mod. It may crash right now. The model editor has a tendency to crash without notice, so just expect that, it's alright. So I have that open. I don't need it open, by the way, to edit models here, but I just like to keep it open in order to view how the models, when I export the models from 3ds Max, in order to view them how they appear and how they appear in the model editor. Actually, let me just create a new scene. Okay, so under Santos Tools utility, I've selected my mod. I can now import models from that mod, export models to that mod, and manage animations related to that mod. So I can't access anything outside of the mod because, oh, actually, sorry. Can I? Yes, I can. I actually can. But yeah, regardless, a mod is just technically a folder, so it's just a folder. It's just a folder under your DoW2 install directory. That's all it is. Alright, so let's import a model. Get started by importing a model. I'll cover these in a moment, but let's just import a model, and let's import that apothecary. So there's the apothecary. Now let's go over what these things do, now that I have a model to demonstrate. So the meshes are, allow me to do something for a moment. I hope I can hide the materials. Material copy. There's a way to hide these. Assign material selection. How do you hide these? Reset map. Make material copy. It's using this, but not sure why I can't select this regardless. Let me just apply a no material. You'll notice that my model currently, these things that you see here that I'm selecting are actually the 3D geometry. Okay, so they don't have materials applied, but if I select all of them, I can drag my material and it should assign properly. So that's the geometry with the material applied, but let's just remove the materials for the time being. So if I was to check this off, the materials, without anything else, I would just get select similar height. I'm just going to hide these for a sec. Height. So if I was to just select the meshes, I would only get these. So these are just geometry. It's a 3D model, 3D mesh. Okay. So all it is I can even show you under here. For the time being, I'm just gonna to demonstrate sort of the Santos Tools rollout. All this is just a map of a set of coordinates that map to each other, and in combination they make up this mesh. Okay. So that's essentially what meshes are. So if I was to only select mesh, I'd only get this mesh object. Now if I was to select materials, I would actually get this. I would actually get the meshes with the materials applied. Now if I was to apply bones, I would actually get the bones, and I'll be explaining bones and rigs in a moment, or in just a while. And then the markers, remember I was telling you about the markers. Well, if I remember, there were like two markers at the legs here. They essentially indicate effects. So bones are markers. These are bones. These are markers. Okay. For the time being, you can ignore this box here. in 3ds Max it's interpreted as a dummy. In the actual game, it's actually interpreted as a bone. So you'll see here, bones, skeleton root. Skeleton root's actually a dummy here, but it's actually a bone here. It's indicated here. So not to worry. It's shouldn't concern you too much. I'll be explaining how to sort of I'll be explaining how the hierarchy of bones and skeletons work in just in a short while. But so that's essentially, these are the core components of a model. So you got the mesh as I showed you before, and then when we apply the materials, we get sort of the materials mapped to the mesh. We further can import the bones. So if I move one of these bones, you'll see the finger move. Actually, let me just use the head bone. You'll see the head turn. See that? So that's these bones control the head, or just the overall mesh, through something called the skin modifier. I'll be detailing some of the modifiers that are important, some basic modifiers that are important to basic model editing. So let's go back to the rollout. You have bounding volumes. You'll remember that. Okay, so bounding volumes. Right, so you know what? Let me import it once more. I'm going to import the apothecary model once more outside. Okay, it's good that I ran into that error. So when I try to import the model, I select this, it gives me this error, which is that the file that I chose to import is outside the current module. And that's actually in reference to this, so I didn't notice, but I've actually mistakenly changed the mod I'm working with. So I actually try to import something from the test mod, but the current mod that's selected is this last step. So I'll go back to test mod. Why are there two? That's weird. Select that. I'm just re-importing it to sort of see how the bounding boxes work. Okay, so I didn't know that Santos Tools 3ds Max actually can import bounding boxes, but I imagine that these are controllable. You can actually scale these. Let me make sure. Yeah, you can actually control these. I'll be demonstrating how to use these, the move, rotate, and scale gizmos in a second. But as I said, these bounding volumes help with graphics rendering. I don't know too much about them, to be frank. I usually don't import or export them. Yeah, I just really don't know how to work with them too much. But you'll recall that sim boxes and cover boxes are actually the ones that determine collision. So a unit's like physical space, as well as the cover box, which indicates the radius or the perimeter for which a unit can give cover. So let me just import those. Let me just import those and just try to edit them here. So if I select those, I can re-import the model. And as I re-import the model, by the way, you'll notice that I have something else checked off, which I'll get to, which is the reset scene. So what this says, it removes everything and it just re-imports all these. Okay. So I've just imported the sim boxes and the cover boxes. So there are no cover boxes, but there is a sim box. So this is a sim box. If I select, oh no, that's the LOD. Okay, that's something else. So I'll explain some of these in a moment, but which one of these is the sim box? Let me just go back to the model editor and open the apothecary. Let's go to the bounding boxes. I think it doesn't have an actual sim box, which is why if I select this sim box and actually press Ctrl S to save the model, it should save a file called simbox with these coordinates, and if I re-import this, it should import the sim boxes. Yeah, there are my sim boxes, as you can see. It's even called simbox, so I can actually edit this. Again, I'll be covering these, so I can actually scale it. It's much easier to scale here, as you can see. But how do I bring it upwards? Yeah, so like this. Anyways, I'll be going over how to use some of these tools in a moment, but I've just deleted the simbox, but that's essentially what these things do. Once you import all of these and you have them here, when you we'll get to the export, but when you export it, all of them will be exported and they will show up here. So this will be checked off, I think, by default. So if you import a simbox and edit it, so if you import a simbox here and edit it and then export it, you'll have, once you open this, you should see the simbox with its new dimensions. Let's look at the smoothing. So these are concepts that are important to know. Smoothing groups, you can see this model sort of jagged. Essentially what we need to do to smooth it out is sort of apply modifiers. So under modifier list, I can go to smooth. Right, so if I just press S, it'll take me to the S section. So smooth. I can choose one of these, and it smooths my selected mesh. So this body that I had selected, the chest, the pauldrons, is now smooth, and then the backpack is still jagged because I didn't apply the modifier. So this is what I was referring to. You have different mesh objects. This is one mesh object. This is another mesh object. But okay, so what's smoothing? Well, it's not actually changing the actual vertices, which is the geometry. So these vertices don't change, and I wish there was a way to. So you'll notice this is the model without smoothing. It's all jagged. But if I was to apply smoothing, I'll explain the stack, how to manage your stack, your modifier stack in a moment. But I'm just gonna bake the smoothing, so to speak, into this mesh. And so just ignore it and go yes. So when I go back to the geometry, yes. So you'll notice it didn't actually change. It still has the same number of vertices. So the complexity of your model hasn't changed. All that's changed is how the actual texture is rendered onto the mesh in order to give it this sort of smooth effect. Okay, it's pretty wild concept in my opinion, smoothing groups, but they don't actually change the what's the term, the actual geometry, the complexity of the model. All they do is actually just give the effect of a smoother look, which is to me it's just mind-boggling how it works. That's smoothing. So I can press Control Z to undo. That's the smoothing modifier. As when I deleted it, it's gone back to its jagged look. And you'll see here, select vertices. They're still the same vertices, they haven't changed. Whereas there are ways, obviously, to make this actually smooth, like change the geometry to make it more detailed. Okay, so that's what smoothing groups do. And DoW2 requires you to apply smoothing groups in 3ds Max. At least that's my experience. That's been my experience. So before you export a model, if it looks jagged, it's either a really poor model or it just doesn't have a smoothing group applied. You can research smoothing groups in further detail. You can actually apply one smoothing group to the entire mesh. It doesn't matter. To me, that's always worked fine. Unless I wanted to apply different smoothing to different parts of the mesh, I can, for example, actually this isn't really going to be relevant to you, but I'm just going to demonstrate it anyways. You can select part of the mesh, and then you can actually apply. Wait, sorry. Is it under? How do I? Okay, so there's another way to do it other than this. It's under here somewhere. Or is it? Yeah, you can under here. I can apply one smoothing group to one part of the mesh, and then I can apply a completely different smoothing group to another part of the mesh. So 21, and you will see a slight. You will see like some part of the mesh is actually jagged because we're applying different smoothing groups to different parts of the mesh. But if this is all too confusing, all you should worry about is don't worry about the smoothing groups or just applying it through here. All you have to do is add a smoothing group modifier. A smoothing group modifier, and that will smooth your mesh. And just select one of these. Yeah, select one of these. Yeah, so smoothing. Those are smoothing groups. You always want to apply those because DoW2's engine won't do it by itself. And then there are normals. So normals are actually a way for a game engine to know on which side to render the texture. So let me in fact create a new 3D object mesh, a rectangle in this case, and let me just apply one of these apothecary textures to it. Right, they're just really hideous. But if I was to, as you can see now, the texture is sort of rendered on the outside. But if I was to sort of flip the normals, don't worry about this for now. What I did is I just added a normal modifier, flip normals, and what you see now is the black exterior. That's because there's no material rendered here now. But if I go in within the box, within the mysterious black box, I'll notice something interesting. Within the box is the actual texture. So what normals do is they actually tell the game engine on which side of your mesh to render the texture. So if I was to undo flip normals, what happens is the texture is now facing the outside. There's actually a better way to know. I use the normal modifier. I can actually go to edit normal, and what this does, oh my gosh, what is this? Let me do something else. Edit poly, edit mesh. It still does this annoying thing. Let me do it on the apothecary to demonstrate. So on the apothecary, on his helmet, what I'll do is I'll apply edit normals. Edit normals, and you'll get these lines. No problem. I'll do Control A to select them all, and I'll sort of click and drag here. Just click and drag down to sort of shrink them. I just want to demonstrate something. It's not important that you know this, but these blue lines are, each of these blue lines is perpendicular to face. So how can I? Okay, so each of these blue lines is perpendicular to a face of the, or rather to a vertex. So all it's doing is saying, look, I want the textures to be rendered in this direction. Okay, and so if I was to actually flip these, let me just add normal and flip these. So it's now flipped. And technically speaking, it's hard to demonstrate here, but technically speaking, those blue lines are now facing inwards because they're saying that the texture should be mapped inwards. So the blue lines are the perpendicular blue lines, which are also called normals, are now facing inwards. So that's one thing you gotta make sure if you sort of have this black, if you have these black faces, you know the texture is not rendering on the outside of the face, or the outer face. So I can actually show you how this is gonna look in the model editor or in the game. So if I just export Armor Apothecary, let's call it Apothecary Test. Let's export the model. Okay. Let's try it, see what happens. Let's open that test model and see what happened. Okay, so actually it's completely disappeared, which is rather strange. What it should have shown is how the... Okay, this is... Let me just remove this, add normals. Export. I just want to demonstrate a point. Sorry about the sidetracking. I hope I can demonstrate it. If not, I'll just... yeah, so great. So we can see something very weird here, like a transparent, almost translucent model. Well, what's actually happening is the actual texture is being rendered on the inside, so that's his face showing from the inside, rather than the outside. The outside is transparent because there are no materials mapped to the outside. That's how game engines are, or that's how graphics rendering is very efficient. It doesn't need to map textures to both inside and outside, only to the side that you want, and in our case, it's obviously the outside. So that's the idea behind normals, right? So in Santos Tools, you can import normals. I frankly have never used these. All I do is actually apply them to the model myself, and I'll be demonstrating modifiers and modifier stacks in a moment, just a moment. But that's essentially what that's importing. Okay, let's see. So with these, you can import reset a scene. So basically, when you want to import a model, you reset the existing scene. So what it'll do, it'll remove everything, including textures or materials, and then it'll import your new model, whatever you have selected here. You can save the scene. I've never actually used this much, but I think what it does is saves the current scene in a file, and then it imports the new model that you want. Merge, what merge does is whatever you're importing, if there is something existing here that matches in terms of name, such as a bone that's the same name, or material texture that's the same name, it's going to merge them, so it's only going to leave one of them. Group meshes. So what this does is, you'll notice here that say this apothecary has one. If I change this, you'll notice something. Wait, okay, no, that's the wrong one. I think it's this one. Wrong one again. Which one says apothecary? Yeah, I think it's this one. So yeah, so you'll notice these parts of the apothecary, they're actually separate meshes, but they all have one texture, which was this texture 5. And the reason they only have one texture is because we imported them using group meshes. So what it's doing, it's putting all meshes with the same material as one group, so I can actually move this around. So that's what it does. You can uncheck it and it'll import, I think, actually let's just, instead of speculating, let me just demo it. Let's just demo this instead of speculating, because I don't actually use it that much. I can separate the meshes by myself. I'll show you how to do that. So let's see. Did I have it checked off? Group meshes. I did not have it checked off, but it is still importing it as one object. Okay, regardless, this is why I don't use some of these things. They don't even work that well. Weld vertices, I honestly don't. I think what this does is just like 3ds Max, you can actually, if you have say under my mesh, go to the vertices, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, so if I delete a vertex, something really bad happens, which is that I lose every polygon that was mapped to that vertex. So if I select those vertices again, and I do weld here, so weld the selected vertices. Okay, it's saying, it's giving me a weird, so let's just select 3, and I do weld. Huh, that's weird. Let's try 4th one and weld selected. Okay, that's odd. Essentially what it does is, I think, is it just closes the 2 vertices with a... I just want to demonstrate it to you, but essentially it just closes this break in the vertices. So. No vertices within weld threshold. That is so weird. Wrong one. Yes, I'm a bit stubborn. Trying to get this stuff to work. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to prove my point. But I think that's what it does. What it does is undo this, basically. Let me undo. If you imported a model that's like all broken like this, what it does is the following. Hold on. I think I've run out of undos. I can't undo it. But essentially, it'll weld these vertices together. But yeah, I don't use it, so I don't see the DoW2 either. Finally, there's the import biped. For that, I'll be discussing it in greater depth in the animation video, but essentially what bipeds are. Let me just import it just to show you. Import bipeds. And let me set the scene. Great. So, pause the carry. Bipeds are just alternative versions of a skeleton. So if you noticed earlier, I had these bones that look like this. Well, if I hide all of this mesh, I get this colored bone, and this is just a different kind of bone system in 3ds Max. We have various bone systems. We have bones. We have bipeds. I can create one, and this works like a bone, but it has other advantages. I'll be covering those advantages in the animation section. In terms of rigging, I don't think bipeds, when you're just editing models and rigs, bipeds aren't very useful, or they don't offer any particular advantages. So I'll just import the apothecary again to show you how exporting works. So let's move on to exporting. So I've just imported the model, and I want to now export it. So I go under the export rollout. So I can export a model, but first I should tweak the export options. So I have various options, but for the time being, what I'll do is I'll ignore these, because these are largely related to world objects, so like walls, stairs, fences. They're not related to gameplay, or they're not related to player-specific things like buildings, vehicles, and infantry, which is why I won't be covering these things. But yeah, they essentially indicate the condition of an object and what thing to render, sort of what mesh to render, given the status, the damage state rather. But I won't be going over it in too much depth. I usually uncheck these for like infantry, for vehicles, for player buildings. You can choose to have a symbox or not. If you have this one here, for example, I can export it, or by checking this off, I choose not to export it. Finally, I can choose where my model goes. So, can I export my model to other than my mod folder? I believe I can. Yeah, I can export it wherever I want. So you can select where you want the model to go, and you can just hit export. Wait, sorry, export here. I'm under the export model. Let me just close the animator rollout. So I'm under the export model. Preview model, I haven't used this too much. It's pretty glitchy. That's why I don't use it. But that's essentially how you import and export models. So now, let's see, let me just refer to my guide and see what I should cover first. So I've done essentially a coverage of what the model editor and the Santos Tools stuff in 3ds Max, how it works. Various elements of DoW2 models. So I already told you guys what mesh objects are, what materials are, bones and markers. So I've explained these, but I will be explaining these specific ones, how to edit meshes, materials, or how to apply materials, and how to connect stuff to bones, like markers and meshes, how you connect those two bones. I'm going to show you also, well, for bounding volumes, you can just, actually haven't created a bounding volume from scratch. If you want, you can actually just import one here, like a symbox or bounding volume, and just edit it yourself. So I won't be demonstrating that, how to create bounding volumes, but all you can do is export existing ones and just edit them. Again, the tools tool will be covering 3ds Max tools. I've already demonstrated smoothing groups and normals, bounding volumes, I already said that. Rigging, as I said, I'll cover. Important modifiers, I'll be going over smoothing. Not smoothing groups, but actually smoothing. I'll be going over the normals again, just briefly. Skin, so that's the most important modifier to rigging. Essentially, rigging in 3ds Max, skin is akin, or is synonymous with rigging in 3ds Max. I'll be going over the editable mesh modifiers, and also be going over some of the functionality of 3ds Max, and important pitfalls when exporting your models. So I'm just debating what to start with. Should I start with the 3ds Max functionality or with the modifiers? I think I'll start with the 3ds Max functionality. But before I go there, I think I'm going to take a break. So I'll see you after the break.